Welcome to Remarkable Retail Podcast, Season 11, Episode 3. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
On this episode, our very special guest is Lauren Steinberg, Executive Vice President and Chief Digital Officer, that's new for her, at Loblaw. Lauren is a retail veteran. Loblaw Digital for close to 12 years, and most recently was Senior Vice President of Loyalty, Retail Media, Digital. She's probably one of the most impressive executives in a group of very impressive executives, is not running one of the line businesses. And Steve, while they're a Canadian-based retailer, mostly almost exclusively operate here, I'm pretty sure their reputation exceeds our borders.
Oh, for sure. Well, I've known about Loblaws since the 90s, probably, just because they were known to be just this incredibly successful grocery store. But in particular, and we talk about this a little bit, it was their private brand strength. That was something that was really interesting back then. Now, obviously, that has morphed over time, but they were a real pioneer in that space. And of course, in the last few years, we've talked about this on the podcast. Some people, talk about in the context of trading down, but what I think has been interesting about their private brand strategy for multi-decades is it's really basically a powerful national brand, right? Like, I think there's probably a lot you know better than I would being Canadian. I don't know if people even necessarily think about it as, kind of like Kirkland's at Costco, right? Like, it's such a powerful brand unto itself that happens to be a powerful differentiator. But Loblaw is one of the biggest retailers on the planet. Just happens to be mostly in Canada. But lots of great lessons from Lauren with all her vast experience and a lot of the exciting things they're doing there.
Now, I saw on social media you were on a stage this week at UTD, University of Texas in Dallas. I think I got that right.
That's right. There's a relatively new retail innovation center at the University of Texas at Dallas, which is, 40,000, 50,000 students, something like that. And I was very honored to be asked to give the opening keynote at the very first conference. And I think we're going to maybe talk a little bit about a couple things that I talked about on stage, but congratulations to them they got a great turnout. They put together a really good mix of industry speakers.
Fantastic. And I want to get back to something that you and I were talking about off mic about RH that came up in the context of that event and things you've been thinking about. So we'll get to that. We'll talk about RH specifically a little bit later. All right, let's jump into news of the week. And I guess for the listeners out there who are thinking we're the tariff and economy show, not much actually happened in the world of tariffs this week. Although my vibe is that the implications, particularly of things like de minimis, which are very immediate, are starting to kind of not dawn on people, but kind of be seen more so and be more evident. Talk about what you're seeing.
Yeah, I think it's becoming more apparent. We just got through earnings season, and as we talked about a little bit, several big retailers said that they are raising prices, that it is hitting their bottom line. We'll talk about that also a little bit more when we talk about RH. So I think the impacts are becoming more clear. What I think is going on more broadly is how the tariff impacts are starting to get into more economic policy. And so, for example, the European Central Bank, they had their meeting last week, and they talked about the interest rate environment, their growth expectations, and they're starting to see really a more steady economic environment. No need to raise interest rates, but talking about how the global chaos, supply chain issues, intercountry trade is starting to affect the growth outlook, which is overall fairly tepid. In the U.S., we continue, of course, it's like every week there's some new macroeconomic indicator that people are trying to figure out. There was a comment from Mark Zandi, who's the chief economist at Moody's, who I've followed for quite a while. And actually, he spoke at an event. I met him 15, 20 years ago now. But he said inflation is uncomfortably high and it's accelerating. And of course, we were in an environment a year ago or whatever when the high inflation was coming down quite a lot. But this week, we got some news that food inflation is really starting to tick up. Just a couple quick stats. Roasted coffee, of course, a lot of that comes from Brazil, where there are very high tariffs, up 22%. Uncooked steak, So, as opposed to buying it in a restaurant, that's what we mean by that, up almost 17%. Eggs, which of course were a big story during the Biden administration, had come down a lot, now going back up. And
that's more economics. The last time eggs went up like that, it was the avian flu, which had kind of killed the herds, which takes some time to repopulate. But this seems more inflationary than kind of connected to that. Yeah,
I think there's still a little bit of a lag there, but much more other factors driving that. One of the interesting things, which I think we'll be hearing more about as we get into the next quarter of earnings, is apparel prices had a pretty long trend of coming down. Now, some of that was the mix because the off-price retailers and the discount, Amazon, Walmart gaining share but that trend is now starting to reverse. We're starting to see actually some apparel price increases, and presumably that is apparel driven, but also energy prices. You think about the things that are going to limit the discretionary income that consumers have. I mean, that's the thing to really be concerned about. Energy prices, both electricity, which is being driven by AI, just these massive data centers, but also natural gas prices are up quite a lot. Healthcare costs, of course, are a big influence on consumers' ability to have discretionary spending. Now, they've, in the U.S. anyway, continued to grow much higher than inflation, seems like for decades. But they're about to go up a lot next year, largely because of the so-called Big Beautiful Bill. So I think consumers, as they start to sign up for their healthcare choices, whether it's on the so-called Obamacare of the exchanges here or through corporate, I mean, those we've seen, estimates of them going up between 8 and 15%. So that is going to take a huge bite out of particularly consumers that don't have so much money. Yeah.
Well, and for consumers that are value shoppers, it's it eliminates discretionary shopping, basically, right?
Right. Yeah. So that's very concerning. So, the thing that actually, by the time most people are listening to this, will have already been decided, which is what the Federal Reserve is going to do with interest rates. Because of the weak job numbers that we talked about last week, and there was some indication this past week of some further slowing in the labor market, the sense is that's giving the Federal Reserve the license to start cutting interest rates. But the inflation rate, that's kind of the offset. So we'll see what they decide to do. It's always dangerous to make a prediction where 24 hours later the news is going to be there. My guess is they're going to do 25 basis points, not 50, because of the inflation concern. But it's also going to be just more interesting to see what the commentary is, because obviously one move is not setting the direction. But what we're seeing pretty much around the world are interest rates are already lower than the U.S. And for the most part, the cutting cycle has paused, where it looks like the U.S. is really just going to kind of get started. So we'll see what that all means for the future.
All right. Well, it's a very dynamic environment. We got even more global turmoil this week, and the economic chickens are coming home to roost, if I could continue the egg metaphor. Let's talk about. You mentioned RH. Let's talk about RH. Right. Some news on RH, and once again, you brought it up in the context of some of the thinking you've been doing about how you take a business and a business model and change and create ambition and growth. But talk about what's going on with Restoration Hardware.
Well, last week, so there were two pieces of news which kind of prompted me to add it to the list this week. One is they opened what looks to be a spectacular new Paris store. You can go see pictures on the internet, 7 stories. They've really taken their food offering apparently up to the next level. It's on the Champs-Élysées, so it's a beautiful historic building. If you know the RH galleries, you kind of get the general sense for how I don't know, over the top is maybe not the right word. Maybe remarkable. Maybe I'll go with that.
Oh, but there you go.
In any event, so that was something that's been in the works for a long time and looks quite spectacular. The other thing is they did report their earnings, and they were quite strong. They obviously are continuing to gain market share. Operating margins are very high. The home industry has been very stagnant, but they've been able to put up some strong sales and earnings in that environment. And but they did get good deed goes unpunished by Wall Street. They did warn, as we might imagine, that tariffs are going to have an increasing impact. And they've been doing a lot of moves. I won't get into the details of this, to shift their supply chain, some of it outside of China, some of it to the US. And that's a big project. They've been working on it for a while. And there are also some concerns. They have these new stores are very capital intensive. They're fairly highly leveraged. So there's a bunch of things going on. They
just opened another one before Paris. I guess this is their French theme. They opened one in Montreal at a fabulous new Royal Mount. But so it's not like they're one store at a time.
Yeah. So anyway, that's maybe a topic for a different day. But the reason why I want to bring up RH and in the context of the conference that I spoke at last week, or I get asked the question a lot of who has gone from basically either completely stagnant growth or really struggling to really reinvent themselves in a fundamentally different way. And there aren't that many stories, and RH is one of them. And just a little bit of quick history, when Gary Friedman became the CEO in 2001, the business was basically on the brink of bankruptcy. And so he did a lot of things, I guess you could say, were more incremental in terms of addressing some of the fundamental problems in the business, introducing new product. I mean, some people may remember that they went from being kind of a tchotchke hardware store to more bath and, other kinds of things, linens, those kinds of things. So there were a number of moves that were great growth increments and changed the stores to a certain degree. But more or less 2010 was the big breakthrough where they came up with, or he came up with, the team came up with this RH gallery concept. So instead of these smaller stores that were nice, but not incredibly aspirational, they rolled out their first store that was this palace, basically, of home furnishings that not only had these incredible displays, beautiful architecture, but also some of them had pools, coffee shops, fine dining, et cetera, et cetera. And that has evolved to where they have opened the Paris store. They will be opening a store in Mayfair in London next year. They've got this estate, that so-called countryside store, which is 2 hours outside of London, which has other things going on, which again, don't have time to get into. But the reason why I say is, I think if you've got, and we always use the department store example, but if you've got, it could be Toys R Us, it could be Bed Bath & Beyond, these businesses that at one point had a very viable business model, but started to become irrelevant, basically. My question always is, will incremental change get you to where you want to be? What I found myself saying when I was talking about this in front of the audience was, if you're a struggling brand, tell me where you're trying to end up. What I sometimes refer to as Earth 2. If Earth 1 is becoming uninhabited, and you can't think of a way to save it, which, maybe a little bit true in reality here on Earth.
A little close to home a little bit.
What's the future destination? And I can tell you from my experience at Sears, to a lesser degree at Neiman Marcus, but certainly what we've seen with many of the category killer type stores or department type stores, which were incredibly powerful in the 80s and 90s, and not so much for the last 20 years, they never articulate a very exciting future destination. It's great to improve your merchandise assortments and have more sales help and change the lights and fix the carpet and all that kind of stuff. But does anybody believe that those companies are really going to be an exciting future destination? And so what RH did is they created something that leveraged a lot of their expertise, took some of their customers with them, but created something really powerfully different. And yes, they had to test it. And yes, it's evolved. And yes, it's risky. But the riskiest thing at RH, and people have heard me say this before, I'm sure, the riskiest thing at RH was to continue to try to drag the corpse around and prop it up and do a lot of incremental change. That might have made them better, but it was never going to make them great. And I think that's the challenge that we see with the Kohl's. It's the challenge we see with office supply store. Like a lot of these businesses, which have been going nowhere for many, many years, most of what they're trying to do is incremental, and they've never really articulated where you're trying to get to, and is that an exciting destination? And that has implications for people wanting to work there and stay there. That has implications certainly for attracting investment. So anyway, I think the RH case example, I mean, they've done some things wrong, they have some risks, et cetera, but they're really somebody who's aimed higher, moved fairly fast given the capital intensity, and been much more bold. So anyway, lots of issues there, certainly with tariffs. They're slowing down the pace of their openings to try to get their balance sheet in a little bit better place and just understand really what they're dealing with in terms of the influence in the business. But anyway, I think RH is a great story of what I mean about leaders leaping, and you can go see it and see how different it is. And if you remember,
you don't have to imagine it. You can. Here's the case study. Is this going to work?
And if you remember what their stores looked like 10, 15 years ago, it's pretty obvious. So, do the same thing at an updated Macy's versus a Macy's they haven't touched. And you're like, yeah, it's better, but is it that exciting? Maybe not.
Maybe not. Interesting. All right. Well, we'll be keeping an eye on that. It'll be a fast moving story, no doubt. Let's take a break, so to speak, from the news and insights, and hear news and insights from Lauren Steinberg from Loblaw. Lauren, welcome to the Remarkable Retail Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Doing fantastic. Where are we finding you today?
Today I'm in Toronto. I'm looking out onto beautiful Lake Ontario.
Nice.
And I'm just, but I'm in a boardroom, so not getting the full effect of the weather changing, but so far so good.
Well, I've been really looking forward to this. I've seen you on the stage a couple of times, and Steve and I were saying, how do we get Lauren on the mic? And you've got such an interesting remit and a broad overview of a business, and you're working for a super interesting business as well here in Canada, and now starting to do a little bit of stuff in the U.S. So why don't we start out talking about you? You're a veteran in the digital space. I see you worked all the way back to PennyIce.com back in Montreal.
Yeah, ice.com in Montreal is like legendary. Anyone who's doing, in the e-commerce game and from Montreal, they probably spent at least a year or two at ice.com with their early, online shopping days. And so I'm proud to have that, deep on my LinkedIn. But I actually started in web development and graphic design, and eventually positioning myself as a digital marketer. But I pretty quickly gravitated towards like this intersection of technology and commerce. So I do have this like really broad toolkit of, designing, building, and running. But for the last decade, I've been at Loblaw, and I've been, building a combination of like digital infrastructure and customer facing applications that literally millions of Canadians use to discover and plan and shop every single day. So like the reach and, the impact is massive. And, whether it be Canadians like building a shopping list on our PC Optimum loyalty app, or doing their weekly online grocery shop with our PC Express business, or even like refilling your prescription on PC Health. Like we're touching that. Those are the things that we're building. Those are the, the experiences that we're imagining up and trying to perfect for our customers. Today specifically, I serve as Chief Digital Officer. I lead, like you said, I think I have a super cool job. I love what I do. I lead our e-commerce, digital, loyalty, and retail media portfolios. And I think it's just like a really unique vantage point, because it's not just about building apps, or, building ads. It really is about how all of those levers, the, digital, loyalty, and media, how they all kind of work together to drive value for Canadians, and by virtue of that, really just growth for this business. So for Loblaw, on a total basis. So I love it. I love our team. We've got a great team over here. And I learn new things every single day.
Well, let's not assume that everybody knows who Loblaw's is. I mean, they're Loblaw. Like if you're in the global grocer or pharmacy business, you'd be very, very well apprised of the business. But let's not assume. Tell us about Loblaw, the scope and scale, Shoppers Drug Mart too, and what makes the brand remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, Loblaw, people sometimes think of Loblaw as just a grocery store. In reality, Loblaw is Canada's largest and most diversified retailer. We have over 2,400 locations across the country, nearly like 30 million customers, which is virtually every Canadian who, can shop.
Right.
We operate across food and pharmacy, loyalty, financial services, apparel. It's a pretty remarkable portfolio. I think what makes us remarkable, in my humble opinion, is the scale and the trust. Like we've got, 19 million loyalty members. We've got millions of weekly transactions. We've got touch points that stretch from like acute healthcare in our pharmacies to what's for dinner in our grocery stores. And I think that combination means that we're not just serving customers, we're really shaping how, folks in like big cities, small towns, how, they live their daily lives. And I also think what I love most about this company is actually not anything that I own in particular. It is our world-class in-house brand, President's Choice. And so you'll hear me say PC a lot. We use it as like a unifier for some of our digital products and services, but our portfolio of PC products, like our control brand food products, is a powerhouse. Like we've got 4 of the top 7 selling brands in the entire country, and they're only found in our stores. Like you can't even get them everywhere, right? So our food developers, like they have the best jobs. I mean, it's crazy. I walk into that test kitchen and it's like they're tasting cake and I'm like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah,
this is incredible.
Great place to spend the morning. And for our folks in the apparel side of the business, Joe Fresh, that's Loblaw. Like there's so many brands that would be familiar, right?
Totally. Like our food developers, our apparel designers, like they're not following trends. They really do set them. And I think, from a food, when we are at the heart, we are a food retailer. So like, seasonal favorites like candy cane ice cream. Like I love the everything bagel hummus, everything bagel seasoning hummus, spicy ketchup chips, like the quality, the creativity, the exclusivity of PC is unmatched. And it's one of the biggest reasons I think I love working here. And I think why customers choose Loblaw.
Well, I've been following Loblaws for quite a while. I don't normally talk about this, but I started my career, or very, very early in my career, I worked in the CPG business for a little bit. And when we were studying some of the interesting grocers around the world, I remember in particular looking at the President's Choice brand, but Loblaw's more broadly. So anyway, it's great to catch up here decades later at this point. Yeah. But why don't we talk about the customer a little bit? I mean, obviously you have an incredibly diverse customer base, so it's kind of hard to talk about the customer. But if you were to think about how you might segment your customer base or how you use customer insight to really both drive your marketing efforts, but maybe drive your product development efforts as well, how would you think about that?
Yeah, it's so true. You make such a good point. Like we serve everybody. We are here to serve all Canadians. And so it is hard, to characterize that. I think like at the highest level, to the macro level, customers, Canadians right now are squeezed, right? Their time is squeezed, their money, attention. They're asking us to deliver more value with like less friction. So to me, when I hear that, and I know that's universally true, and there's obviously micro elements that we're doing, but from a macro level, if they're squeezed for time, money, and attention, that means like we are focused on convenience and affordability and relevance to drive our strategy. And like so, just as an example on convenience, for us, that's like probably one of the most fundamental parts of like, a digital strategy for us. Like it's about making our products more accessible. Like you want your groceries delivered to your doorstep in the next 15 minutes. Like we now have that. You want them in the middle of the night. We've got that. You want your prescription automatically refilled, like set it, forget it. No problem. We could do that. We could do that for your prescription. We could do that for your diapers. We could do that for your, oat milk, which is actually the #1 subscribed to product on our online grocery platform. I think more flexibility in how, where, and when you shop is like a core part of what my team's mandate is. And that really is, nicely or really beautifully aligns with this notion that Canadians do want choice, they want options, and they need flexibility because they are squeezed. And I think beyond that, whether it's loyalty offers that feel more rich and relevant, or it's just like, retail media that makes ads less noisy or more useful, I think we're designing with the reality of their lives in mind. We've got so many folks who just obsess about the customer. And I think we'll talk about it probably later, but like as we move into this world of like one-to-one personalization powered by, generative AI, powered by agentic AI, like it's limitless, but fundamentally it never changes. We always want to save our customers time. We always want to save them money. We always want to make, we want to deepen our relationship with them, not by giving them points, but actually by building trust and making them feel seen and known. And so that's really fundamental for us and our strategy.
We'll be right back with Lauren Steinberg from Loblaw right after these messages. Promotional support for the show comes from Find Mine. In the time it takes to listen to this ad, your team could have leveled up their productivity by 90% and set up your brand for increased sales. Find Mine's AI tools let you run operations on thousands of products right now. Get self-service AI to support product tagging for better success with AI agents, dynamic programmatic ads for Meta, visually similar product recs, complete the look styling, trend, and campaign curations. Find Mine's innovative enterprise platform currently generates breakthrough customer experiences for top brands like Lululemon and Ann Taylor. See what Find Mine can do for you and join the waitlist at findmine.com/remarkable retail. Promotional support for the Remarkable Retail podcast is provided by Crave Retail. What's retail's biggest blind spot? The fitting room. A shopper wants to buy, but can't get the help they need. That's why global brands partner with Crave Retail, the market leader in smart fitting rooms. Crave connects that moment to your business, giving shoppers a voice, associates real-time alerts, and teams the data to buy smarter. The result? Higher conversion, better decisions, a seamless experience. Learn how fast you can elevate your fitting rooms at craveretail.com.
And can you give us maybe a little peek behind the scenes as to how you prioritize or how you even figure out where to focus your energy? Because at one level, convenience, value, et cetera, these are not unique things for most retailers to try to work on, but to actually go through and say, okay, given what we think is going to be most powerfully relevant with the customer, these are the marketing treatments we're going to focus on. This is the product or the supply chain kinds of things. Like how do you actually navigate down to those specific initiatives that you're going to prioritize?
I mean, there's so many ways. I would say it's a combination of listening and looking, right? What are customers telling us? What are they showing us by, the actions that they're taking, how they're using our products, where they get tripped up, what doesn't feel natural. I think and oftentimes the best improvements for those experiences for our customers are the simplest. They're the least sexy. They're not the big swings. They're not the big, headlines of new partnership with these folks, or now you can do X, Y, and Z here. It really is, I can now see all of the products associated with this PC Optimum offer with a click of the button instead of me looking around and having to find them myself. Like it really is just spending time. I mean, we have a space here in our office where we bring customers in every single day. And we ask them to do a simple task, and we observe how they do it. And we, say to ourselves, wow, that's how people are, discovering that. Like, for example, you watch the average customer, a Canadian, doing their online grocery shop. They've got like 20 tabs open, different retailers, different, product pages, different recipe sites. I mean, they're juggling. And so we use that type of information, that observation to inform, the feature set that we build to make recipe or meal planning easier, right? It's like that kind of stuff. It's not rocket science. It's usually the most fundamental of things. And it starts with just listening and using a ton of analytics as much as we possibly can to inform that.
Lauren, you mentioned one-to-one, and then Steve and I have been in the retail loyalty game, so to speak, since Rogers and Pepper's one-to-one, and Optimum is just a powerhouse of a pan-banner platform, but it's not a strategy in and of itself. How are you thinking about the investments in what we would know as loyalty, and what matters today to the organization and in the future? You've mentioned AI, for example, the power of AI behind loyalty can be quite compelling. But where's your focus, and how are you aligning that strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think customers want quote unquote loyalty programs, right? They want value that feels designed for them. And so into the future, I think loyalty is going to blur with personalization. To me, it's not points in exchange for purchases. It's kind of an ecosystem where shopping and saving and engaging, those all feel pretty seamlessly connected, right? Friction-free, we often say here. An example of that would be opening your PC Optimum app and seeing, yes, your personalized offers, but a one-click, pharmacy booking appointment, widget because, you're due for your flu shot and, a one-click pay the balance on your PC MasterCard, pay it with points. And you could do all that in, one simple, easy click that feels, intuitive and timely. To me, it's loyalty should not be a program sitting off to the side. It's kind of part of how you live your life day to day, and the value just shows up at every turn, like whether that be in savings or time or care. I think we're really starting to reorient ourselves around the customer need and not the line of business. It's not like, let me toggle to now I'm grocery shopping. Let me toggle to now I'm, buying my pharmacy household items. Okay, now I got to go and pay this bill. Okay, now I got to go book this, acute care appointment or whatever that might be. Like my kid has this rash, and there's
or even food recall. Like one of my favorite applications as a shopper with Loblaws is sometimes food is recalled and it's quickly off the shelves, but it's still in the pantry, right? And, open up the app or you get an email saying, we know you bought this.
Totally.
Throw it out or bring it back. That's so huge because it's so fast moving and, it just really adds such tremendous value and an attachment, I think, to the brand that you actually care about their well-being, right?
Totally. And I mean, we're even thinking about, extensibility into services not managed or owned by us, but that are helpful and adjacent to the things that customers do already do with us. So for example, if if I live in Toronto in one neighborhood, but in a neighborhood, not 10 minutes down the road, they have different recycling prohibitions. Where I used to live, I could recycle this clamshell, raspberry carton. And where I live now, I cannot. And I buy that, where I live because I shop with you and I deliver products to my doorstep. At the end of my shopping, remind me, hey, this item is not recyclable, or hey, this item is, because we've toured some of these facilities and the amount of recycling that people think can actually get repurposed and cannot, and ruins the whole process and system. I mean, we care a lot about the environment. We spend a lot of time and money and effort into a lot of these ESG goals, and so for us it's just as important. To Canadians, it's just as important. And so we have that, to me, is what building loyalty in the future means. It's really understanding the customer, helping them manage day to day, providing value throughout that journey. Whether it means buying from us or interacting elsewhere, it's irrelevant.
So maybe shift our attention a little bit to the role of technology in doing all of this. And of course, there's lots of hype and maybe a little bit of creeping disillusionment with AI on the part of some folks. But I'm curious where you guys are at Loblaws. Where are you focused? How much of that is really more, say, efficiency driven? How much of that is more what we've just been talking about, being more relevant, being more personalized? And I guess agentic AI is also on everyone's agenda. So just give us a little bit of how you're seeing that and how it's starting to play out at Loblaws.
I mean, we're so deep into our journey. We've been using AI across so many different, parts of our business for so long. And of course, there's new nomenclature and it's all the hype. But for us, it really isn't hype. It is true, value and execution. I would say at a very high level, we're applying it in probably three big ways. The first would be obviously automation. Driving efficiency in things like supply chain forecasting or labor planning or call center workflows, a lot of the stuff that you read about in the headlines, and that stuff is legit, right? We are finding so many opportunities. One of my favorites right now is store maintenance. We've got 2,400 stores. They all have, a busted light or a broken floorboard or a wonky shelf or whatever that is. They all have to, or a leaky faucet or there's always something. Mm-hmm. And they all have to manage that. It's running a store is like running a town. It is a lot. And so we built a tool that identifies the issues. You just type it in. We'll find the closest, and most cost efficient resource to come and fix that. That's accredited. We can even predict before something has, end of life, and get someone in there to fix it before it breaks, in which case it actually is cheaper and more affordable to manage. And just the amount of savings of millions of dollars from doing that. And so like just trying to find, more of those. There's so many, just makes everyone's life easier and just saves money, which we can then put back into, better pricing of products for our customers. The second is personalization. Like I've talked a lot about this on my LinkedIn. This is like, I'm so psyched about what we can do from a personalization perspective, essentially using AI to, tailor this one-to-one digital experience, using these like really rich customer profiles that can infer, preferences, dietary preferences, pricing preferences, product preferences, and just remove the clutter. Like it's less about showing you the relevant things. It's just about not showing you the things you don't care about, and like the time you waste looking through that stuff, right?
Yeah, but boosting the signal amid the noise, right?
Big time, exactly. And then I think the third is like, to your point, where the future really lies, which is agentic AI, just kind of moving from AI that recommends to AI that kind of acts on behalf of ourselves or even customers. Like I imagine a digital agent that, knows your household preferences, knows your dietary needs, your schedule, and can actually plan and execute, a lot of your weekly or daily tasks for you. And that shifts from tools to like a teammate, and I think I'm really excited about that for myself. And then as someone who's kind of running a big part of the digital retail part of the business here, like the options are endless. And so like,
do you worry though? Do you start to turn your mind into how consumers can use an agent, not your agent, to do their shopping? And then now you've got a whole new intermediary to kind of manage or build authority with, or, you don't have a relationship with. Do you, just from the other perspective, do you guys turn in your minds to that?
Yeah, we're absolutely thinking about that. I mean, I think there's a time and place for every tool, right? Like I think there's certain things that people are going to go to ChatGPT or Perplexity for, and there's other things that they're going to want to come to us for. It's the same. We Google all of our symptoms, but we still go to a doctor if we can, right? And I think that there's going to be a version of that as it relates to this. Like, we do have trusted pharmacists. We do have dietitians. We do have, relationships between customers and many of our colleagues in the store that like know their needs and their hopes. And like, we are the heart of many communities, our grocery stores, in small towns across this country. And so I think there will still be a time and place for each. And I think we are uniquely positioned with the context that we have and the products that we have to do it really well on our platforms, but we also will partner with those third parties to bring our products and services into theirs, and maybe do more of a seamless handoff versus a complete, cut us out, cut them out.
Yeah. Let's spend 1 minute, and then I'll pass the mic back to Steve on retail media networks. So important, and to a grocer and retailer of your scale, pretty important. It's not like it's new that you would be approaching brands and CPG companies with opportunities for partnership, but now you're doing upfronts. You're like a full media company. What's your strategy here? How do you eventually? There's a lot of asks on the vendors, from everything from flyers to co-op to retail media. What's your strategy here, and where do you think that's going?
I mean, our retail media strategy is really just, simply put, about connecting brands and customers in ways that are just more accountable and more measurable, and frankly, more useful than traditional advertising. Like I said, we sit in a unique position. We've got millions upon millions of loyalty members, billions of annual transactions, and customers are engaging with us across like physical and digital retail. And that lets us do two things really well. Like, first, it helps brands reach the right audience with precision. That's what they want, right? They don't want to waste dollars. Like, for example, I know a customer bought a 42 load laundry detergent thing. Like, don't hit them today with an ad for laundry detergent, right? They're not going to buy that. That's wasted dollars. We can do that. And then second, actually closing the loop by showing what drove real sales, not just impressions. I told you I was a marketer back in the day. I never liked the idea of impressions. Impressions just meant, did they see it? Maybe even not.
Yeah.
Did they buy it? Did they buy something else when they saw it instead? What else did they buy? And look, the reality is, it's, retail media is not without its challenges. I think, the industry is still navigating a lot of fragmentation. Brands have to choose between so many networks, each with their own standards. Measurement, another big one. How do you build like confidence that someone like Advance, our retail media business, delivers incremental value and not just attribution games, and of course, we take customer trust really seriously. Like, we're careful about how our data is used. We have to make sure advertising enhances the experience rather than, becoming intrusive. We used to have a guy here from Netflix, and he always used to say, like, every ad you add to your experience makes it worse. And the reality is that's not necessarily. Meanwhile, Netflix, they're going the way of advertising, but like, it's not necessarily the case. Like, I think if we can do personalization well, we can do ads really well. Yeah. And I think what we're focused on is differentiation. Like, yes, we can do what any retail media network can. We can, do targeted and measured digital ads, but we can also connect that to the physical world. Screens in our stores. People are waiting to pick up their pharmacy prescriptions. They're standing there. In-aisle activations, like audio, while millions of Canadians are literally shopping for dinner. We've got in-store audio. Better than hearing the ad in the car on the way. Why aren't you hearing it when you're looking at that product in the aisle? And I think that combination of scale and measurement and reach is kind of where, we're trying to carve out our edge. I'm super excited about it. I mean, there's a ton of stuff that, I can't share today, but like some really cool partnerships, and the opportunities here are just really cool. I mean, margins on retail media are not like, margins on grocery. Like, so
a little more, you got a little more wiggle room to play with.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think for me, it's like fun. It's a fun new problem to tackle. And I think, again, having this portfolio of digital and e-commerce and media and loyalty, that's the point, right? Bringing these together because they all need each other to be successful. And individually, like if they can each pull their weight, the whole combination of it just unlocks this massive opportunity for customers to have better experiences, for Loblaw to just, have this emerging kind of, these growth levers.
So interesting. Before we let you go, maybe just a couple of last questions, kind of shift a little bit here, more towards leadership. You've had such an impressive career leading up to Loblaw's and at Loblaw's. Any just pieces of advice for folks that are listening, trying to lead change, maybe get into some of these newer areas more deeply as to things that have really worked for you, or maybe things to watch out for?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's like a few things that I always do that have just continued to offer returns for myself. First is like curiosity, like just always try to get involved in things, always put your hand up, always ask the question, always say like, hey, I have a little capacity, like I can participate in that if you need some help. And by virtue of that, A, you get exposure, and so you learn, and B, you become known as this person who can just help. And I think it's just this like virtuous cycle of opportunity that materializes from that type of, that curiosity kind of behavior. The second, I kind of said at the beginning, but like, I think range, this is probably more for like, younger folks, maybe not necessarily, but people getting into certain careers, like being willing to kind of cross disciplines and pick up skills. Like, I spend a ton of time learning, like I can build a ton of apps with some of these new AI prototyping tools. And, I don't stop playing around to build my toolkit. There's very little that I can't kind of spin up myself because I just have this broad toolkit. And I think developing that really helps you do a little bit of everything. So again, you get those opportunities, people call on you, and the more they do that, the more you learn, the more, opportunity there is to rise up. And then I think lastly is often overlooked. I call it resilience. But I think like big companies move slowly at times in some areas. Mm-hmm. Progress comes from persistence, and people are always rushing. But actually the best returns come from like sticking around. I always say the hardest thing to do is stick around. You got to eat yourself. You got to kind of, lap yourself. You got to stick around to like, whether the things that you did were successful or not, and take the heat or the credit for that. Like sticking around is hard. I think people move around a lot, and there's benefit to that for sure. But there's also a lot of benefit in kind of hanging around and really growing, your reputation and your credibility and banking on your wins and losses. So I would just I think that's an underrated thing these days,
Absolutely. Well, I love that. And thanks so much being so generous with your time and so generous with all the wisdom you imparted. We're really delighted to have had you on the show and certainly wish you and Loblaws the best going forward. And hopefully we'll get to see you out in the wild in real life one of these days. So, but anyway, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
All right, we are back. Great interview. And, she's had such an impressive career in a fast-moving industry, so it was great to get her on the mic and hear her perspectives while Canadian-based, very global orientation, global focused, and global best practices. So I think that's what I took away from that. Let's talk about remarkable stories. So what do you want to raise up, and what have you been thinking about in terms of remarkability?
One of the stories from last week that's gotten a fair amount of buzz, so maybe some of our listeners have taken a look at it, but if not, I want to lift it up, is the digital transformation at Sam's Club. And there are several things I think are really interesting about this. One is just, and I know we've talked about this in the context, many people will know Sam's Club is part of the Walmart family, and just this idea that big, complex, ossified, maybe in some cases, organizations can still do some really innovative things. And so we've usually talked about that in the context of the Walmart brand, but Sam's Club is doing a lot of interesting things, and people might want to go back and listen to our interview with their president, Chris Nicholas, earlier in the year. But what they just rolled out to 100% of their members, because it is a membership warehouse club, is a new presentation layer on their app and their website. And what that means really is as the consumer comes in any kind of digital experience, whether they're sitting at home checking things out, which of course, many people might plan when you go to a warehouse club, tend to buy a lot of stuff. So you may be doing some research and planning what you're going to buy, but also while you're there, doing scan and go checkout and a lot of other kinds of things you can do. They've really taking that to a whole new level. So I'd ask if you're a Sam's Club member, you just want to go check it out, see kind of the state of the art of what people are doing and you may have to be a member to see all this stuff, but more personalization, greater integration between the physical and digital experience, more video, creating capabilities to deliver more ads on the platform, which of course is growing very, very quickly and is becoming a big profit driver. So, in terms of the implications of this and why I would suggest people go check it out is, number one, and this is a little self-promoting here, but a lot of things that they're doing are very much tied to the 8 essentials of remarkable retailer, like really being human-centered in the approach you take. So they talk about this as being people-led and tech-enabled, but really thinking about it as largely I don't love saying digital first, because clearly there's lots of things that are still analog that are important. Sure. RH is a great example of that, right? So you need to tailor that to your particular customer and category experience, but leveraging the latest and greatest in digital technology, integrating across the different channels. As a membership organization, of course, they have a ton of data. I mean, you're basically a logged in customer, so they can leverage that data and make it a more personal experience. But I think a lot of what they've done, and I've heard, you and I heard Tom Ward speak at the Commerce Next Growth Show. He's their chief operating officer, and he's responsible for their end-to-end customer experience. I think you can really see how that's playing out. I mean, when he talked about it, we didn't know that this was about to come out, but I think you can really see it in how they've looked at the customer journey and found ways to take the friction out, to amplify the wow. So anyway, I think it's really impressive to see kind of an old dog learn new tricks, but really kind of see the state of the art in many respects of what retailers are doing.
Well, and I'd just add, like, listening and reflecting on what you've been talking about, it's really the epitome of this, these aim higher, move faster. That can be at a big retail. Big retailers can move higher and aim faster. This isn't just for nimble startup.
Well, they were, from some of the, I mean, I don't have firsthand experience with this, but some of what's been reported, they've been testing this and progressively rolling it out. So part of the announcement was, it wasn't just like this was behind the scenes and boom, everybody has it. They've been testing it, refining it, and last week was when they really put it to the whole chain. So it's very much a test and learn thing. And that's part of the way you get speed, right? Is and manage your risk. So it's not reckless. It's just smart innovation.
All right. Let's talk about the next phase, the next act, a peek around the corner. What's on your radar screen for the next coming weeks?
A few things really quickly, and ties back to what we were just talking about. I mean, the direction of interest rates in the U.S. anyway is very important. We'll see where that goes. Now, it's important to say that just because short-term interest rates come down doesn't mean long-term interest rates are going to come down. And that's much more important to things like the home industry really getting back on its feet. So anyway, we are going to be in a little bit of a dark period. We're pretty much done. We've got one more big retailer that I can think of that I'm particularly interested in, Costco. And I'll talk about them just in a second. But, one of the things that's great about earnings season is we get a peek under the hood at what is going on at particular retailers. We get to hear them talk about what's driving their business, what they're looking at. Well, now we're going to have a couple months before Amazon reports, and then we start in the string of earnings reports. So it's going to be a little bit unclear. So unless companies do an earnings warning or for whatever reason speak about some bigger trends, we're going to be a little bit dark here as we move into the holiday season. Okay. I guess the other thing that's kind of related to that, and I've heard people start to refer to it as mini stagflation. So some people may remember that I talked about the worry that we would get in the U.S. anyway to a period where we start to have meaningful inflation again and growth really slows. And that's a very difficult place to be for a bunch of reasons that people can probably imagine if they don't know. And I think the narrative that's somewhat starting to develop is growth's probably not going to be terrible. I think the whole idea we would go into a recession, not too many people seem to think that's very likely anytime soon. But if growth slows meaningfully and inflation starts to tick up and we get the squeeze that we were kind of alluding to earlier, particularly for lower middle income consumers, that's a pretty vexing place to be, and that could lead to layoffs and that could lead to a bunch of other things. But anyway, last thing is Costco's earnings. They're the third biggest retailer on the planet, I believe. That's definitely the third biggest in North America. They've been growing quite nicely, and their commentary about how they're growing because of the trading down phenomenon, just consumers being more value conscious. Part of this narrative I've talked about a bunch of just so much growth being concentrated in the hands of just a few retailers. They're one of them because they've been growing 6-7% when the industry's been more around 4%. So they report, I guess, the week after, or I guess next week. So we'll see what they have to say and whether that gives us any clues to what the holiday season is going to look like and what 2026 is going to look like.
Well, I certainly admire Costco for a whole bunch of reasons, and I think they're a great bellwether. It's how people find value in very different ways, right? Than value shopping. So they're an interesting bellwether because it captures a sense of the market. Both value to them is being able to buy large size to get scale and per unit cost, right? It's a very different kind of thing.
Yeah. And the other thing I think that's important about Costco, which I think sometimes people overlook now, even though it's very much the origins of the warehouse club model, is a good percentage of their customer base are small businesses. So not only are you're getting a read on the consumer, you're often getting a read on smaller businesses. So they're able, I think, to distinguish between individual versus corporate membership. So that'll, to the extent that we think small businesses are getting squeezed maybe a little bit harder by some of the tariff stuff, maybe we'll get a little bit of a glimpse into that.
All right, let's leave it there. We'll be back next week with another exciting edition, backed by popular demand, of The Analysts. Stay tuned.
Thanks for tuning in. To help more retail leaders discover the industry's leading podcast, please drop us that 5-star rating and review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you enjoy your pods. And for more on my strategic advisory services, keynote speaking, best-selling books, and even more retail industry insights, go to stephenpdennis.com.
If you are a brand or service provider looking to take your influence to the next level, reach out to us for sponsorship, advertising, or event partnerships. And if you want to learn more about my own keynote speaking and advisory practice, reach out to me via LinkedIn.